Hello, and welcome to the Voices of the Industry podcast by the AI Localization Think Tank, where we discuss really interesting and hot topics related to AI and the localization industry. Today, we are so lucky to have Tamara Tirják with us, who will be sharing her insights about AI and game localization and more. Welcome to the podcast, Tamara.
Thank you, Belen. Thank you for having me.
We're so happy to have you. And for those who still don't know Tamara, she's been in the industry for 18 years, working both on the vendor and client side, mainly focused on the game localization vertical. She spent half of her career at Frontier Games as head of localization, and currently she's an independent consultant for Be Lazy and NIMSI Insights, and independent trainer for the Localization Academy. But what I like the most about Tamara is that she's also a yoga teacher, and she has this very cool newsletter called the Yogi Leader, which I follow and love. So if you're not subscribed, go and subscribe. I also love the volunteer work that she does for women in localization that we will discuss later today. So again, thank you, Tamara, for being here today with us and share your wealth of knowledge with the AI think tank. And we are going to start with the first question. So you have recently written this article for NIMSI Insights called Game Localization Strategy, a Framework for Global Growth, where you discuss the unique challenges and opportunities of game localization. This is very interesting, but in my experience, gaming companies have been surprisingly slow in adopting AI technology as compared to other verticals such as SaaS, like software companies and things like that. So I wanted to ask you, why do you think this is the case, and what is so unique about game localization that makes us move slower in AI adoption?
Oh, that's a really good question, Belen. There are a couple of things I would say. It's a multifaceted issue. So, number one would be player reception. So, AI tools are quite valuable in localizing content, quick, fast, efficient, and pretty high quality. But game content is not just content, it's art. Just like I feel that the wider public is quite reluctant to read AI written books, AI generated games, watch a movie that was created by AI. I'm not sure I want to spend 2 hours of my life on that, right? So there is definitely a reluctance from players to accept art produced by a machine. And this is a big deal for gaming companies because the market is oversaturated big time. If you look at just Steam store for PC gaming, then what is, I think there are about 130,000 games available on Steam at the moment, so the competition is huge. So if we compare it with other verticals, so if, for example, Microsoft makes an AI-related mistake in a translation, I probably won't uninstall my Windows 11 because I need it for work. That's where my entire life is running, so I can't just do that. For games, if I launch a game and I say that it's unplayable because I can't understand it, or it's just so bad that I'm just really not enjoying it, which is the point of me going into the game, then within 2 hours I can click a button, get a full refund, and move on to the next game in my way too big wish list. So the competition is huge. So gaming companies can't really afford to have that. And the other thing is, I just recently read this article that mentioned that, as you're probably aware, any game that is published on Steam is obliged to tick that little disclaimer that the game uses AI generated content. And that immediately warrants a couple of negative comments. And according to the stats that I saw in this article, is about 2 to 5 times as many negative comments come from that checkbox being ticked. So with 130,000 games available, discoverability is a huge challenge for any game companies, and the number of negative reviews pushes down their review score, which feeds into this discoverability algorithm. So AI being a little bit cheaper for, let's say, localization is a small part of their budget, seriously. But getting 5 times as many negative reviews as they otherwise would pushes them down on the list. That's a huge damage in terms of their revenues. So no wonder that especially bigger AA and AAA companies are quite reluctant to go down that route. So definitely I see this as one of the obstacles. The other thing is, as I mentioned, games are creative products. So copyright is still quite a gray area because games can be counted as derived products because we are unsure what any of the engines are trained on. So that is big, especially for companies who work with an IP franchise. And there is also the pushback from industry bodies such as SAG-AFTRA that protects the rights of voice actors. So they have quite a strict AI clause that companies have to comply with if they want to work with a SAG-AFTRA talent for recording voiceover. So you might have heard the story about the Game of the Year award from last year, where Expedition 33, an absolutely stunning game. I had so many beautiful hours in that game, and they got disqualified, supposedly because they used AI-generated assets early on in production for prototyping that were eventually replaced, but the award committee has a zero tolerance towards AI. So while there are still stories like that in the industry, premium companies are going to be reluctant. On the other hand, indies are quite open to experimentation because the small independent teams, for them, using AI to generate some assets means a lower barrier of entry. They are always struggling for time, money, talent. So for them, being able to use some AI for localization is a huge opportunity. And I mentioned the player pushback to AA and AAA companies. They are a lot more forgiving to indies if they have a really good gameplay idea, the human spark of creativity, then they forgive them for using some AI generated assets in other areas. And then might ping them, hey, there is some really bad translation there. Mind fixing it? But they will keep on playing and supporting the team with the good idea. And another really huge segment to mention here is mobile. Because while bigger companies, developers are more cautious for the reasons explained, for mobile, it's a great opportunity to be able to iterate faster, try a lot of things, do things cheaper, and all of these are very important for their competitiveness. So they are a lot more open to just go crazy and test things and measure and then iterate on that later. So for them, again, AI is giving a huge advantage there.
That's super interesting, Tamara. I completely agree that the brand reputation topic is top of mind for most of the studios, as you mentioned, especially AAA studios, because they do really care about what players think, and players are really passionate about these things, right? It's not, as you said, it's not like using Microsoft or using the Uber app or any other SaaS type of software company that, okay, if the translation is not perfect, who cares? The stakes there are not as high as in the gaming industry, where people can go to Reddit and start complaining about this company that is not putting enough effort into pleasing the gamers in a specific territory, and people really feel very connected with the products. So
Exactly. Yeah.
that's definitely something that I've been seeing. And one thing related to indie developers, it's interesting that you mentioned that they are more open to leverage AI. And at the same time, in my experience as well, I've seen the opposite, which means that some of these indie developers, because they see it as a form of art and they are creating these more interesting experiences, not so mainstream, they want to have the full pipeline fully human. So we've seen some indie, not all of them, because not all of them have the budget, but some of them would rather just go fully human, not even use machine translation for translating the game, but just fully human. We want the human soul to be in the all parts of the game. So I think, as you said, what's interesting about what you're saying is that there's very different segments within the gaming industry. So it's not black or white or all doing this or all doing that, but it depends on basically their priorities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we've seen in the past is that players love to have a big bad game studio narrative. So if they see that a major developer dismissed a few hundred people because of a layoff last year, and then now they push out a game with the AI asset, then there is a narrative of, oh, they dismissed all these people and now they are using the AI, doing the work with the AI instead. So that just spirals out of control as a very bad PR narrative.
Yeah, exactly. It's difficult to come back from that. So that's really interesting. Thank you for sharing, Tamara. And so moving on to the next question, it's very interesting the work that you are doing as an independent consultant for Be Lazy as well. Workflow integrations and orchestration is a very hot topic these days. The new buzzword is orchestration. I think everyone is talking about that. And Also, one of the most recurrent topics that I've been hearing in the community and in conferences is that TMS is dead. Someone killed the TMS, and everyone is talking about these monolithic things and poor TMS. I feel very attached to the TMS infrastructure, and I think TMS still have some life and some great things to do in the future, but this is what most people are saying in the community. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think about this statement? Is TMS really dead? And how can integrators and orchestrators support take over localization infrastructure, which honestly, okay, it's from the 90s probably at this point, to the next level in this AI age?
The discussion about automation is not new at all. So if I look back at my own career, so when I started as a technical translator, getting 200,000 words of help files as one dump, saying, deliver it in 2 months, enjoy. So that was quite a typical setup. And then just 10, 15 years ago, those content drops already became really tiny. So a few hundred words was already a big one. And then you got multiple of these every day. So automating that pipeline was already a buzzword pre-neural empty before the industry
Yeah.
jumped on this new shiny toy. So the automation question is definitely not new. But whether the TMS is dead, that's an interesting one. So there are definitely a lot of structural constraints with translation management systems, such as the segmentation and forcing translation memory use, like we're worshipping our TMs above all else. And they have served us really well for the last couple of decades. And still, the per word pricing models are the prevailing model. So we have a bit of a chicken or egg problem. Until this change, TMS is the tool to serve these needs. So we don't know which one will change first, because TMS can't change because there is a demand for these structures still. And also, TMS is still assumed that the project manager's role is data entry and micromanaging everything in not just the translation management system, but also the business management systems. And let's be honest, there is no value creation there for the project managers. So automation and the integration between these systems is essential, because otherwise we can't really talk about content pipelines and localization ecosystems, because without automation and integration or orchestration, we practically have a bunch of tools running around like loose chickens and the PMs on the verge of burnout, just trying to herd them together. And that's just not a viable business model. And the other thing to this is that there has definitely been a shift in buyer behavior. And as the question, why should I work with humans when AI can translate too, is raised in pretty much every company. Maybe with the exception of games, as we discussed, and regulated industries. They are no longer willing to pay not just for translation, but for project management and vendor management either, which used to be the main value proposition from LSPs, be it a big MLV or a smaller a boutique SLV. Yeah, while we no longer have the translation challenge that much, we still have the infrastructure challenge, and the whole thing is about removing obstacles from the content highway. And yes, so Be Lazy understands the need for a robust integration platforms that allows all these systems to not just talk to each other, but work together, while at the same time understanding that there are vastly different needs at localization companies and localization teams in-house. So we need to cater for that really varied setup.
Totally. And I believe I've been thinking about this a lot. I really like TMS, and I think it really puts a lot of order into the chaos that localization pipelines could be without that TMS in the middle. Let's not talk so negatively about TMS, because I think they solved a very good challenge, a very important challenge for many years. And because we all got used to TMS, and for kind of, okay, we're complacent, and okay, we have the TMS, so we can process all these different files in the TMS. It doesn't matter if it's a spreadsheet with 20 columns and things like that. It doesn't matter if the original is like a total mess. It's okay, because the TMS will solve that challenge, because it has all the filters and all these amazing things and regex and all the things that we all love. If we want to move into further automation, super smooth, streamlined, so many things need to change upstream with the content creation. And I am not sure if people understand what that actually means and how many things need to change. Also, another thing that I'm seeing these days is, okay, we want to automate, but do you understand your current process? Because most people don't understand their current process. And most people don't understand where their data is and how structured it is and who maintains the data. So there is a lot of lack of governance, I would say, across the board. So trying to automate this is very difficult. And one interesting idea that came to my mind the other day, talking to another company doing this type of orchestration, is that because they were like, for these super automated workflows, we cannot work with spreadsheets with 20 columns and all this information. It doesn't make sense. We need the source, the actual source, because the spreadsheets in localization usually are like an adaptation that is good for localization, but the source of the game is probably a JSON file or whatever other format that the developers are using. So would there be a future where we can directly go to that JSON file and have a process where if a string is updated in the original in that JSON file, then it would be real continuous localization, not what we have today, which is pseudo continuous localization, but real continuous localization. Would that actually happen? But so many things need to change, right? So anyways, sorry for digressing a little bit, but I believe there's so much to be discussed before going into killing the TMS, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
indeed. And I think you made such an important point, is that a beautiful side effect of any automation or integration project is that you are forced to review where you are at the moment with your process, what is happening at each of the process steps, where the data is, as you mentioned, and then how would perfect process look like, and then work around with that. So this understanding of what is going on in my company with this process right now is hugely valuable. You can't automate it because by automation you just make a bad process run quicker.
Exactly. And it will break in a minute because the process,
Exactly.
it's not defined in the first place. So yeah, thank you for entertaining my idea for a minute. Now, changing the subject, let's talk a little bit more about education because that's also such a big open question right now in our industry. And you have recently finalized your course on game localization for the Localization Academy. So I wanted to ask you whether you can talk a little bit more about the education challenges that we have right now and how we should be building skills for this future in an AI-dominated world. What are your takes there?
At Gala World Ready last month in Berlin, there were many conversations around and with educators. And it's no wonder that traditional training programs are struggling to keep up with the constant change in the industry. So, from my personal experience, my own translator training took 3 years. It was a part time thing, so we had a couple of hours twice a week in the evening, but it was stretched out to 3 years. That's a huge amount of time. If you think back where the industry was 3 years ago, it was still a, so what's this ChatGPT thing? That's where we were 3 years ago, and where are we now? So things are changing so quickly. So even the language professionals are completely confused and struggling to keep up. And there are no real established and consensual knowledge about what are the new best practices for the fields. So if we don't know it and we can't agree about it, how can this be taught to the next generation? So I think there is a general agreement that a lot of the traditional translation skills are largely irrelevant, apart from a few exceptions, right? But if not that, then what? And how? How can we train the future language and cultural communication, cross-cultural communication professionals if we don't know what those roles are and requirements are going to be? For now, all we can do is make sure that the conversation with educators are happening between the industry and educators. But initiatives like Localization Academy are working towards filling this gap a little bit and provide up-to-date and very practical courses. but it's patching up the system, but it's not a fundamental shift towards a brighter future.
Totally. And as you said, the main challenge right now is that we don't know how the future is going to look like. So what are you going to teach if you don't know what's going to be required? And working on the vendor side, we're also rethinking what our future is. Like transactional localization is dying. We're seeing it across the board. So what are the new solutions, the new services that will be required in the industry or are being required already? And the same for linguists. Like we have to evolve together, even also on the buyer side. How are the roles shifting within the buyer side? And how are we all shifting because we are part of the same boat, right? So we need to rethink that a lot. I think the only antidote is just to stay curious, right? I know this is such a big cliche, but I think the only way to not be left behind is to be in conversations. There's so much knowledge for free on the internet right now in our industry already that at least points you into the direction where is it worth investing my time more, right? And then have more premium content like Localization Academy or other companies that are providing good training, but just take advantage of what's free. Like, for example, the AI Localization Think Tank is completely free, the conferences and everything. Just soak into that knowledge that is free. Follow these guys many people having Substack newsletter as well these days, like Hillary from Spotify and other people who are sharing really interesting knowledge for free. I'm learning every day. I'm learning, interacting with my clients, interacting with my vendors, interacting with my colleagues. The only way where I can start to see, okay, the future is going this way is by being in constant contact with the community. So I believe that's one of the main things that we can do to support people is to give away whatever we have and share it with the world so that people can at least have a path forward or have a clearer idea.
Exactly. And I think that's the magical thing about the language industry is that it's really a community. And there are initiatives like the AI Localization Think Tank, which I'm a huge fan of. I love the work that you do. Is this whole voluntary contribution of knowledge and ideas and keeping the discussions very live and open. I think that's really important, especially since the industry by nature is hugely fragmented, whereas Renato Beninato says pulverized, because we have just a handful of professionals here and a team of a dozen people can't come up with the industry defining solutions. You need to work together to figure things out.
Absolutely. But the thing is that it's not only newcomers seeking guidance on what to do next or what path to follow, but also seasoned professionals who need to stay up to date and continuously upskill, right? It's not only people who are new, but even all of us in this industry having been here for decades, we're still trying to figure out what to do next or what we need to learn in order to stay relevant. And in that regard, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the volunteer work that you're doing for women in localization as the global manager of the mentorship program, because I think that's a very interesting and important initiative at this point in time. And I want to ask how this program helps even senior professionals rise to the latest challenges that we are coming across.
I'm so happy I get a chance to discuss this program because I'm very passionate about the mentorship program of women in localization. And I myself have been a mentorship junkie since 2021. So since then, that was around the time when the program launched. At any given time, I had about 3 mentees. I love that program very deeply. And I became the global manager last year. So that's just elevated to another level of how I can contribute to this program. And there is so much important work happening in the background of redefining how this program can provide even more values to the users. And speaking of users, the program has become quite impactful. It launched with a few dozen people, I think 20 something, if I remember the number correctly. And right now we have over 200 mentors, almost 700 mentees. And right now in the system, I can see about 350 active matches. So this is how many conversations are happening at this time, which is huge. This is the regular program. And on top of this, we do organize additional value adding initiatives such as the Career Launchpad series. So right now we have this series of 3 group sessions happening, one in video game localization, and then the other one is in in-house program management. We have some amazing mentors and speakers, and again, this is very hands-on, very learner-driven initiative. I love that initiative so much. And we already talked about the strength of the community to figure things out. And we also talked about the fragmentation of the industry, which means that a lot of us are working solo. Freelance translators, they are working solo. In many companies, there is a solo localization person driving everything, which is absolutely crazy. And they don't have access to localization expertise anywhere else. So in those situations, a mentorship program is so valuable. Thinking back when I was a one-person localization team at Frontier, I was supported by my manager, but he was in operations or production, and it was very difficult to figure out the language. Very useful because I got to learn what they care about, but at the same time, I was the decision maker. And I would have loved to have that senior person that I can talk to about my struggles, my dilemmas. And this has been huge for me that right now I can be that person for localized single, solo, one woman wonders. So that's very valuable. I'll be representing the program at Game Quality Forum in Krakow in June. If you're there, come and talk to me. I have a lot of time because I love talking about this subject.
That's amazing, Tamara. Thank you so much for working on this initiative, and it's super impactful. The work that Women in Localization as an association does is quite amazing and has grown exponentially over the past few years. So thank you so much for working on that, and thank you for sharing all your insights with us today. It was lovely to chat with you. I have a very positive feeling that the future is bright after talking to you, and that there are so many things ahead of us that we can do to support each other and grow. Yeah, we will be sharing Tamara's details on the description box in YouTube. And if you have any questions, you can connect with her directly. And yeah, and hope to see you around soon.
Thank you very much, Belen. It was a really fun conversation to have with you. So thank you so much for that.